So today, in continuation of our talk on civility on campus as part of the Civility Initiative, I introduce you to Miss Dr. Yolanda Sealy-Ruiz. My pleasure.
Oh my goodness, I better bring it after that, right? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everything. Before we even start, you'll notice, first let me thank a couple of people, although I have it embedded in the presentation. Elaine, thank you. Ron, thank you. And I also want to thank Michael Hyde, because Michael and I went to school at NYU, and although we don't see each other as much as we would like to, when we do, when we have our lunch or dinner every, I don't know, 3 years, it is always such a beautiful moment to be in your space. Michael, you're a beautiful writer and a quiet, beautiful spirit. And so I just want to thank you for being here and being my friend. So having said that, there are these life stories cards that are in the center of your table. So I am convinced that I've made the stock go up in this company, because I've been using life stories for about 10 or 12 years. It's actually a board game, but I've taken the cards out, and it goes beyond the surface of, you know, breaking the ice. So I'll say one thing. I want us to spend about 5 to 7 minutes just reading a card and then sharing the answer with your table. If you choose a card that is too personal, you can choose another one. If you choose a card that doesn't relate to you, so for example, if they ask you to reflect on your siblings and you're an only child, or perhaps a sibling has passed away and you don't want to reflect on your sibling, so you can choose another card. So let's go ahead and choose a card, read it aloud, and let's talk to each other. Let's tell some life stories. Okay, sorry to interrupt. I really am, because this is what we want to hear in our classrooms, right? But just quickly, what was that like? What was that like? Great? Relaxing, refreshing, easy. Ice-breaking. Other thoughts? What was that like? What did that feel like?
So nice to talk about things about ourselves rather than complaining about it.
Right? Shifting the conversation, right? Well, I want you to consider life stories in your classroom. You can ask your students to create the life stories cards, because they probably know what they want to know about each other, but it's a beautiful opportunity to really go beyond the surface and to bring it in multiple times during the semester. You know, when there's a moment, maybe you feel tension, or maybe there's some things you know that are going on in the school and students are being affected. So it's an opportunity to build that community in the classroom. And before we begin, what's your name? You're reading with the beautiful hat.
Oh, Nancy.
Nancy? I love your hat. Happy Halloween. So before we dive in deep, I want to take a moment to recognize that we are on stolen land, and that it is likely wherever we are in the U.S. and specifically Canada as well, we are on land of indigenous folks. And while there were 14 tribes here on Turtle Island, also known as Manhattan, this particular area was founded by the Lenape peoples. And so what I would like to do is just take a moment of silence, a couple of seconds, in recognition for the indigenous brothers and sisters who were here long before us. Thank you. And I want to share that there are actually a lot of institutions of higher education that are opening up their school year with land acknowledgement, specifically in Canada, in New Zealand, in Australia, and it's catching on in the United States. And there's a purpose for it. It's an opportunity to offer recognition and respect. It's also an opportunity to model the way that we can be respectful to one another, acknowledging what came before us. I think about even this area here and the students who come in it. Do they understand the history that's here? Do they know who was here before them? Do we? It is an opportunity to support larger truth-telling efforts, to really engage in real conversations about not just the great things about our country, but about the things that are not so beautiful, like what happened to indigenous folks and certainly to other groups. As we are standing in 400 years of inequality, I don't know how many of you saw the New York Times. I'm grateful for the New York Times 1619 special issues, because it's bringing awareness to a lot of folks who may not be aware that we are 400 years into the project of inequality. And it's important to commemorate that. And it's also to remind people that the colonization process is still ongoing, that there are still people around the world who are in enslavement, in captivity. There are still reservations where Native American people are suffering, right, and not living the land that they and their ancestors founded. And so it's an opportunity for us to inspire ongoing action and relationships with one another. And if you're interested in this, there is a website called native.ca. So I imagine that as faculty, you're invited to speak in places across the country. So if you're interested in doing land acknowledgement, you can literally put in the address where you're speaking, and it will show you the Native peoples who were on that land. So I just want to share that with you. And that was put out by the U.S. Department of Arts and Culture. So we started with life stories, and my thank you again to Elaine and to Ron. One of my students said during my diversity class, we were kind of in the thick of it in the middle of the semester, and she said, you know what, part of doing the work is inviting others to do the work. So I want to, again, Elaine and Ron specifically, thank you for inviting me here. And as a result of their invitation, I invite us to do this work together, to have conversation together. A little bit about me. I was born in the Bronx, in the South Bronx. Just 3 years ago, I said I'm a poet. It feels really good, right? Like, I've been writing poetry since I was 15, but 3 years ago, I said I'm a poet. And I own it, and I have a volume coming out from, next year with a small publisher called Love from the Vortex and Other Poems. So I'm just coming out of the vortex, y'all. I am in a beautiful space of healing, and I think it is because of that that I want others to experience healing. Healing in our workplaces, healing certainly in love, healing in our relationships. Associate Professor of English Ed. I spent 13 years in corporate America. And I share that with you because I know many, if not all of you, are from industry. And I know sometimes, as it was at the New York Times and Business Week and NYU, where I spent most of my corporate career, we don't really think we have to take up these conversations of civility or race, class, gender. You know, we sometimes neutralize it and say it's just about the content, it's just about sort of moving the mission forward of whatever we're supposed to be teaching. And corporate America is catching on, slowly. But, you know, I think we have to remember that we are always in contact with people, right? And because we're in contact with people, people bring who they are. Their sexual identity, their race, their class, their gender, the intersections of all of that. So how can we really ignore that, right? Even if we are not necessarily teaching identity, how do we make spaces within our classroom for that identity to flourish? And that really is what civility is, relating to one another by seeing each other in a very deep way, kind of taking life stories and putting it on steroids. And I teach, I have a program called Arts Literacy Justice at the James Baldwin School, where I work with young people who have been affected by specifically Rikers Island. Either they have spent time on Rikers Island or they have family members who have been on Rikers. I have taught in Rikers over time. I do professional development with colleges and schools across the U.S. So that's a little bit of a snapshot about how I've come to know myself in this work. So you have an answer garden. Here's the first interactive point, right? If we can, if you do not mind, I would love for you, And I want to thank Jeffrey. I want to thank Jeffrey for being the awesome person you are. Straight, I think everybody knows that in the room. But from the moment that you knew I was coming to present, just your attention, the texting, to making sure that the presentation was here, to meeting me downstairs. You know, it's the small and large things that matter, but for me, that really matters, that kind of care and attention, so I want to thank you. And because of Jeffrey, you know, we're good to go. And
we'll have an email with the link.
See? Okay, I'm not lying. Right? So if you can go to answergarden.ch/1040369 or the link that Jeffrey sent. And I just want you to type in a phrase or multiple phrases. What does civility mean to you? And the beautiful thing about Answer Garden, if you consider using it in your classroom if you don't already, you know, like a garden, when we put the words in, we'll see it grow. And like Wordles, I'm going to start to refresh. Like Wordles, the phrase or term that's used the most will appear the largest. So I'll give us some time, and we'll make this text together. Oh, absolutely. Is this it right here? I highlighted it. Can y'all see it a little bit?
Read it out.
answergarden.ch/1040369. No? Not happening? Take your time. 1040369. Take your time. We're in business. It's happening. It's happening. So the way that Answer Garden works, the frequency of the word, or if someone puts the same word in 10 times, it could be that, one person doing it 10 times, it will pop up. I have found that it's a beautiful way to use in the classroom to really find out what people, our students know and understand, where there are gaps to learning. It's anonymous, and it can be used for all sorts of purposes. So I'm going to hit it one more time. And so respect is something, right, that many of us feel is connected to civility. Yes, respect is a major theme. Let's see if I can make this a little larger. Zoom. Okay, that's a little larger. So we have embrace differences, being kind. I'm going to refresh it one more time before we move on. Listening, that's key. And if you scroll over, you can see the number of folks, if it's working well, who said this. I don't know the algorithm to it, but I know one thing, that respect and listening is big for us in this room. Social justice, empathy to all, disagreeing nicely, inviting connection, agree to disagree, awareness, presence, listening, humanity, being polite, being understanding, open, perspective taking, right? So that's what we are feeling. Any thoughts on that? I'll go back to our Answer Garden. Let me go back to that and give folks a moment to maybe share, reflect. How are we feeling about this? What do we think? Any initial thoughts off the top of your head? Empathy. Empathy. Mm-hmm. We have it up there. It should be bigger. Empathy is key. And part of developing empathy, I think, is feeling that you, sometimes we have empathy for people that we know a little bit better. You know, Brene Brown, of course, if you've not heard of her work and her TED Talks and her videos, which are beautifully instructive. She talks a lot about empathy. And if you haven't had a chance to look her up, please take a moment and do so. Any other thoughts before we move on? Any other hopes or wishes of what might not be there that we would like to see there? Okay. So if we look at the Webster Dictionary, remember when we were in high school and we had to do papers and we would go to the dictionary and start our sentences? Civility is, right? So the Webster Dictionary tells us that it's a formal politeness and courtesy in behavior or speech. And an example is, I hope we can treat each other with civility and respect. And sometimes in the academy, that's hard. It's very basic, but it's hard. I think about my colleagues, and not to air my dirty laundry, but when I talk about coming through the vortex, I came through a very tough 2 years, specifically in my program. You know, there was a colleague who's no longer there who believed that the use of the N-word was freedom of speech. My other colleagues also believed that. And I think what was most hurtful was that the students, white, black, Latino, Asian, all of them said, wait a minute, I don't feel safe when you're using that. And she continued to use it. She continued to use it because she felt that it was her right as a professor and freedom of speech, and she didn't pay attention to how it was impacting. So I would say that it was, for me, in my research lens, it was racial illiteracy. But some might also say that that was a bit uncivil, right? That it was not, she was not being polite. She was not being courteous in her behavior, speech, vis-a-vis what her students were telling her. And there were other things, you know, I heard faculty members saying things about me. I was in my office, they didn't know I was there. And so there's a lot of healing that's been taking place. And healing is key. But we first have to confront some issues and have some honest conversations, because we don't always have to disagree, but I do think that we have to be respectful and find a way to be kind or empathetic to one another, and then extend that to our students, because our students feel it. If we're like this, I think that our students feel that. So I want to share this perspective on civility.
So there's been a big conversation about civility and the need for civility online. And I actually kind of don't love that word because often what it means to people is kind of respect for the norms or the authority of a group that's in power. It's often the case in society that rabble-rousers and people who are lower on the power spectrum are seen as being incivil. And in fact, if you look back at the civil rights movement or a lot of the most important movements in American history that expanded people's dignity and agency, they were seen at the time as kind of like impolite. And so there's a danger with civility that it's essentially saying like, it's essentially code for let's just kind of keep things as it is and keep whoever is powerful in society, you know, in power. I think the other meaning beneath it, though, that I think is really important is kind of this idea of human dignity and respect. And that, I think, is critical and has been really lost from so much of our online conversation. And it's partly this kind of humble feeling of I only have part of the truth. I can be wrong, and I need other people to help me find a better view of the world. And if I put my piece of the truth together with yours, maybe we'll like figure out something together. I think part of it is a sense that within each human being is something that is uniquely precious. And that it's our job when relating to people to try to find that thing and understand that thing and protect that thing. And that's what makes us human. And so how can we have a conversation where that's kind of the starting point rather than starting out assuming the worst of each other? And so I think that, you know, how do we bring that sense of respect for each other's you know, just the amazing thing that it is to be a unique human individual back into this context where we're encouraged to see each other as little tiny icons and as like reduced stereotypes of each other. That seems like the critical threshold to cross.
Okay, if you don't mind, just turn to one other person, if you can, and relate to what you heard, something that stood out, and relate it to your classroom. Okay, just something that stood out to you with what the gentleman shared, Charles, and how do you relate that to your classroom? Just one other person, or maybe two, depending on the numbers at the table. What stood out to you? How does that relate to your teaching, if it does at all? I would love to hear a few comments from the room. What bubbled up for you? If you don't mind, I'm sorry to interrupt. It's always so hard to do interaction because you're getting right in it. And then you hear this voice, I'm sorry. But I would love to hear just some thoughts. What bubbled up for you? Yes. Yeah, and please tell me your name.
My name is Kyung-hee Pyun. I teach history of art.
Beautiful. Yes.
So what struck me about his talk is that he said, try to be civil means we try to impose the rules or the social norms of that educated sort of what to do, and those who have means on those people who are deprived of those means or other resources and so forth. And I was talking to Yasmin that in my own class, I have a attendance policy. And again, it's a civil way of students treating me, and then I am treating them, right? And so I have a very specific policy in my own syllabus that if you are absent twice, you may consider, withdrawing, I advise, and then if you are late 3 times, it may be equivalent to 1 absence. So I'm just encouraging participation in attendance. And then usually students email me. Nowadays, we can even email in the subway, right? And I am stuck in the subway. And I also ride a subway too, service is horrible, right? And then, I also run into students who say that they are losing their apartment, the lease, and then they may consider going to homeless shelter. And that was,
yes.
the moment of their decision making. And then later I feel like, first I say, you didn't email me before, and you are already twice absent, and then I talk to them and realize that it's not a matter of continuing education or not, homeless shelter or continuing school, or sometimes they go to the emergency room due to a sick relative, and
life.
I used to say, what about your parents? But then, now I realize how insensitive I was. That's the only relative that she has.
Wow.
All those stories, and then again, we should civilize each other, and I treat you with my sincerity, and you treat me the same way. But then sometimes I have this moment of shame or embarrassment. That's the moment,
well,
I was insensitive sometimes.
And we're all growing, right? And that's the thing, right?
It's sometimes very hard. Some people have like a sexual assault on them.
No, that's part of why I respect teachers so much, and I work with K-12 teachers as well as university professors. There's so much that is expected of us, and if we are kind and empathetic, our students know that, and we tend to be the ones that they come to. And when we open up those social emotional windows of opportunity, there's some hard things to hear sometimes, and it's balancing keeping high standards for them, and knowing that their situation at that moment is impermanent, and nothing is permanent, and they will get through that eventually somehow with support and help. So you want them to keep on pushing, but at the same time showing this empathy, right, and relating to them as a human being. But thank you for being vulnerable in that way and sharing. Sometimes it is moments of shame and recognizing our growing edge. And that's the beautiful thing, that we, as long as we're alive, we still have a chance to grow. Yes, and tell me your name. They may know you, but I don't know your name.
Me?
No.
Me?
Yes. Because I thought I saw your hand. I'm sorry, I thought I saw your hand up. Renee. Renee knows her name.
I was telling you.
Yes, thank you, Jeffrey.
And I had a similar takeaway to Kyung-hee. What stuck in my mind was the
fact that the gentleman said that whoever is using, I think whoever's using the word civility maintains or holds power over others. And that struck me as being negative and not what civility is all about. And so when I turned to Jeffrey, I asked him if that's what did he feel? But what I say in my classroom, when I'm going through my syllabus of first class, is that have you all heard about civility on campus? And maybe you've heard about these things in your other classes, and a lot of times they're like, no. Like, well, we all need to remember that we should speak to each other respectfully and to respect each other's opinions, not just in the classroom, but in all of your, not just in this class, but in all of your classes and on campus and in life in general.
Right.
So that I try to present it as a we. Okay. And then, like yesterday, I was like all over the place in one of my classes. I was just totally discombobulated.
It happens.
So I said, you know, guys, let me stop. I'm sorry. I'm having a weird kind of day. So I'm going to sit down. You guys have the floor for your presentations. Everybody has the same amount of time. I do have my phone on, so I was telling you, I have my phone on because everybody has the same fair amount of time. So if you hit the timer, so I sat down and afterwards, are you okay?
Yes.
Are you okay? So
it's how we model, right? How we model. Beautiful, Renee, thank you. And Nancy, if you don't mind sharing before we move on.
Yes, I was really struck by this phrase. We find what's unique and precious in each of us. And I remember my grandmother, who lived to 105, was very wise, would always find the littlest thing, even like a homely looking baby. She'd say, look, she lives. So she would always find something positive. So I think, I'm listening to this. And I really am trying, with my students, because I'm not in the classroom, I counsel students at the Career Center. And what I was sharing with the table is that when students come in and, they're a millennial generation, they're wonderfully bold. And so we don't want to squash that.
Right.
We also sometimes don't know the parameters. So sometimes if they're acting very antagonistic or they have a chip on their shoulder, I try to ask myself why. I listen. And I try to find something positive in them so that they'll relax enough that we can have a conversation. So I have found that to be very helpful, and I was really struck by this because I think that we need to sometimes make an effort to find that beyond the defenses.
Thank you. Thank you. I wish we had like 5 hours together, right? You see how we can go with this. I want to share with you, it's a lot on a text. I usually don't do this because I'm a visual learner, but racial literacy is one of my areas of research, and I find that to be culturally responsive, culturally sustaining, culturally relevant, right? These are the words that we use a lot in K through 12. It's also creeping beautifully into higher ed. But I see racial literacy and the development of racial literacy as a precursor, right, to doing the kind of teaching and creating the kind of environments that we want. And racial literacy, in a sense, is a catch-all for just seeing people for who they are. We know that race is a social construction. We know that, as Norman Rockwell painted with Ruby Bridges, this is the problem we all live with. But how do we make a way to manage it, right, and to have a literacy around it so that we can really see people for who they are? So I argue that as it relates to educators and school leaders, individuals who develop racial literacy are able to engage in the necessary personal reflection. That's where the soft spot is for me, the personal reflection about their racial beliefs and practices, and teach their students and their staff to do the same. So most teachers and educational leaders, as we know, complete their graduate programs without having experienced deep and sustaining conversations about race and how it impacts our teaching, our learning, and the leadership process. But when we enter the classroom, when individuals enter the classroom in schools, oftentimes they're not prepared, right, to work with diverse student body. And diversity is beyond just the characteristics. It's also diversity of thinking. It's diversity of value systems. It's diversity of how people were raised. There's a lot that goes into who we are. And oftentimes, if we don't do that, what I call archaeological dig, of really seeing where these things live in us, we're going to use that always as the barometer for what's right and what's not. But with racial literacy, it's different. And a desired outcome of racial literacy in an outwardly racist society like America is for members of the so-called dominant racial category, which is most of the nation's teachers and professors, to adopt an anti-racist stance. So it's asking you to take on an action, right? And for persons of color to resist a victim stance. As Toni Morrison said, I am not a victim. I never was, right? But racial literacy in schools includes the ability to read, to discuss, and write about situations that include racial inequity and racial bias as part of the schooling process. So I just shared this. It's the same thing, but I felt it was important to kind of pull it out and magnify it. And racial literacy in schools, again, for us, includes the ability to read, to discuss, and to write about situations that include racial inequity and racial bias. Because oftentimes how we perceive someone is how we treat them, right? Oftentimes the stereotypes that are around folks is how we treat them. And that sometimes could lead to uncivil behavior. And so we have to check ourselves and know where that lives within us. So the 3 tenets of racial literacy development, this is what I'm playing with in my understanding, my research, is to always question assumptions, to engage in critical conversations, and to practice reflexivity. And the difference, as we know, between being reflective and being reflexive is once you're reflective, you take action on something you saw that needs to change. That's that reflexivity. It's like, okay, I see that. I know that that's not working right. It's not serving. It doesn't set with my soul. Let me work on changing that. So I'm fleshing this out. And this is the pyramid that I'm working with. This is how I'm trying to think through racial literacy development. This is new for me. And it's not exactly like Maslow's hierarchy of needs or learning, but we do know that there are certain things that have to be in the life of a student, right, for them to have optimal learning. So in that way, I'm influenced by Maslow, and although I understand that there will be movement among these elements, for me, critical love cannot be shifted. Like, that has to be the basis. To have a profound ethical commitment to caring for the communities that we work in. So this is the FIT community, to have a profound commitment to care and, dare I say, love, right? The folks that we work with, the students that we serve, even when it is most difficult and most challenging. And we know that being a teacher is a challenging profession. As being a nurse, as being a doctor, it's a human profession. And it requires a lot of us, more so than some other professions, which is why I left corporate America. At the end of the day, while I was making decent money, I just kept asking myself, is this what I'm supposed to do? Is this it, that I'm writing proposals so Tiffany can place a corner right-hand ad in the New York Times and pay $95,000 a day, right? So that was my own personal crisis that I had to come to understand. And meanwhile, I knew from the time I was 13 that I wanted to teach, and so I started teaching high school at night because that allowed me to breathe. I needed the money to take care of my family and all of that, but I also needed to breathe. And then eventually I left corporate. But I also want to mention, and I was ear hustling, Jeffrey, between you and Renee, and you mentioned humility. And there's a wonderful article I'd love for you. I'll send it to Elaine and to Ron. It's called Critical Humility. There's a longer title about transformation. And there's this group called the European Whiteness Collaborative. These are folks who identify as white, and they talk about what that means. They talk about how that affects their teaching, and they talk about this critical humility stance that they find that they need to take. That while they understand the power that comes with skin privilege, they also understand the humility that is required with that privilege. So I'll share that article. And archaeology of the self, this is a piece that I want to kind of pull out of the pie and present that to us as a way of checking the way that we treat people and whether or not we are being civil in our relationships. Because if we do that deep excavation and exploration. I have to remember when being recorded, I'm sorry. Deep excavation and exploration of beliefs and biases and ideas that shape how we engage the work. That allows us to interrupt ourselves, which is right above that, when we know that we're not doing right by someone or doing right by ourselves. So I can't do any presentation ever, wherever I go. I bring Uncle Jimmy in the room. James Baldwin, Uncle Jimmy. Who said yes? Yes, for Uncle Jimmy. Thank you, Uncle Jimmy, who told us, that was Sean, who said that not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. And sometimes these conversations around gender, around race, around the intersections, around understanding the pronouns that our students now want to be called. Sometimes those conversations are uncomfortable and difficult because of the way we were raised and the generation that we come from. But, as Uncle Jimmy said, we have to face it. We have to talk about it and figure out how we can change it. If we don't talk about it, if we pretend, you know, everything is good, everything is cool, look at the situations that we're in when we turn. And I don't want to say a blind eye because I am personally working on my language with ableism, right? And so when I do stuff in my class where we're looking at our work, I try not to use the term gallery walk anymore because some people don't have the ability to walk. So this is the generation that we're in that, as Maya Angelou said, if you know better, you do better. So I'm just trying to know better and do better. I want to say a little bit about racial literacy because that is the center, the nexus of what I'm offering today as a way towards being as civil as we can with one another. And my colleague Allison Skerritt said that racial literacy has been defined as an understanding of the powerful and complex ways in which race influences the social, the economic, the political, and the educational experiences of individuals and groups. Teachers' development of racial literacy then, which involves a discernment of the structural, the political, the economic circumstances or antecedents that underlie racism and disadvantage. And so what Allison offers is that it doesn't matter what our content is. It doesn't matter if we're in business or whatever it is that we're teaching. We're always interacting with humans, and humans always bring who they are to the space. And we are all under the construction of race and of gender and class. All of these constructs are what we live with. And so we have to face it. We have to engage with it if we truly want to move our teaching forward. I never quote myself until today. So this is what I'm struggling and working with. I said that racial literacy in teacher education calls for self-reflection and moral, political, and cultural decisions about how we, teachers, can be catalysts for societal change. First, by learning about the systems of injustice, and then explicitly teaching our students what we've learned. And since I'm an English teacher, I do that through clay making, through collaging, through journaling, through looking at critical text, and trying to help my students develop their critical thinking and their conversation skills around issues of race, racism, discrimination, and prejudice. And last, I am come to believe that racial literacy asks that we, teachers, take action against injustice in our school settings once we recognize it. And so not only am I quoting myself, in a minute y'all are gonna see a video of me. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the Yolanda show today. I didn't mean to, but I'm also working through this idea of archaeology of the self. So I'm trying to, in a space of humility, share with you what I'm learning about what I'm trying to learn, if that makes sense. But these are some of my racial literacy guides. Uncle Jimmy comes everywhere. Now an ancestor, Queen Tony. Thurgood Marshall, because I am amazed when I think about his position on the Supreme Court at the time of the most infamous and what is held up as racial progress, but yet probably the biggest failures of school equity issues, which is the Brown versus Board of Education. What was it like for him to be the only voice, not saying that others were not sympathetic, because clearly it passed, but I always wonder what it was like for him. Bell Hooks, because she's a goddess. 41 books later, she still has something to say. Can I just get one book out? Can I just push out one book, please? Malcolm X. Malcolm X hangs in my office because whenever I get afraid, I think about Fannie Lou Hamer, I think about Barbara Jordan, I think about Ella Baker, I think about a lot of folks, but Malcolm speaks to me in a way that I don't even know I understand. It could be spiritual. But he's a guide for me, as is Howard Stevenson, who's a psychologist from UPenn, who writes about racial literacy from the psychological effects that it has on both the person that is the recipient of the racial act and the person who's the perpetrator of the racial act, because it affects all of us. And I try not to talk about and ask people to do what I don't practice. And so before I was untenured, and this was based on, I would consider failure in my teaching, one summer course, I decided to create this thing called the Racial Literacy Roundtable Series. So it is now into its 11th year. And over 1,500 people have participated. Grade school, high school, international scholars, doctoral students, master's students. We just come together over food and we talk about issues around race, class, gender. This particular brother, his name is Cesar Cruz. He's from California, and he started the Homey Industries School, and these are former gang members who are now learning to become teachers. And they are teaching in schools in LA. So that's his personal work. And he came, and it was the first time we burned sage at TC. I thought the fire alarms were gonna go off. I was like, please don't let the fire alarms go off. But we were burning sage, inviting ancestors in, writing letters to ancestors. It was the most mind-blowing experience I ever had, ever. People were crying, just releasing and letting things go. So healing was taking place. I want to show this video because while I still believe in us as adults, I know that the promise is mostly with our young. And if we can get them at a younger age to engage with empathy and humility and love, and develop their racial literacy, I think we have a chance at this thing called equity and equality. So let's take a look. I hope you can hear it because her voice is low.
Where are they gone?
Can you hear it?
You don't know. So who ate them all?
Someone come around and they just ate them all.
Someone come around and ate the cakes?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So someone broke into a home and ate Mr. Kipling's Angel Slices. Didn't take the TV, didn't take, you know, some jewellery. They took these cakes.
And it was a black man.
I'm going to let you sit with that because that's often, and I've seen this video multiple times and it affects me the same way. I don't think she can be more than 2 or 3, right? And so you're caught up in her cuteness. You're also caught up in her thinking, I'm in trouble. I ate those cakes, Mama knows it, and I'm in trouble. But at that tender age, she understands a trope. She understands the trope of a black man being a criminal. She understands the trope of, I know what I'll say, I'll blame it on a black man. And her mother's response, I got this video, by the way, off the mother's Instagram page. It went viral. It had over 3 million views within a week. And then, of course, people, and with social media, people were stunned, people laughed. It was different responses. I actually think that that place can be healing, too, when we're not, like, insulting each other and we're trying to engage in conversation. I think people can come to understanding. But my argument is if we can build the racial literacy of a toddler, starting earlier, we can avoid things like this. And so this is a page out of our history. You may not know that this is Emmett Till, and that's Carolyn Donham. And quick story, as we know, 1955, hot day in Mississippi. Chicagoan 14-year-old Emmett Till goes to visit his family. And the rumor has it, or the myth, the story has it, that he's with his friends, and his friends dare him to say something to a white person, and specifically a white woman. And we know that during that time in history, not only do you not speak to a white person, when a white person is walking along the road, you get off the curb, you make a path for them, or you put your eyes down. Emmett had a lisp. So when he spoke, it often sounded like a whistle. Sometimes, like with my braces, it sounded like a whistle. So the story has it that he goes into a convenience store, and 21-year-old Carolyn is there, and he says something to her, and he whistles at her. A couple of days later, in the middle of the night, Carolyn's husband, Carolyn's brother-in-law, and another man come into Emmett's Uncle Mo's home, drags Emmett out, shoots him in the head, ties a fan around his neck, and throws him to the bottom of the Tallahatchie River. Now that's tragic enough. To add insult to injury, the men who did this admit that they did this, and they published their testimony in Look magazine, one of the most read magazines of the time. They go to trial, and they're exonerated. To add more insult to injury, and this is, as we know, what makes Emmett so famous is that his mother, Mamie Till, for the first time ever, Jet magazine, which was one of the magazines most read by blacks during that time, decided to put his, number one, decided to have an open casket, and then to publish the photo on the cover of Jet magazine. But what adds to this story is about 3 years ago when Carolyn Dunham was on her deathbed, a journalist is writing her story. She admitted that Emmett was innocent. She admitted it. So she had carried that lie all those years and admitted it. The story to the left happened in January of this year. South Carolina woman lies to cops about being assaulted by a black man. Susan Smith, about 2 months ago, was released from prison after serving 20 years. If you remember, Susan Smith was a white woman who fell in love with her boss at work. And he's like, Susan, yeah, I'm into you, you're cool, but you got 2 kids, and I don't want any kids. So she killed her kids to be with this man. And she blamed it on a black man. And so this trope of black men wanting to harm white women, whether it is the, what's the story with the 9 Scottsboro boys? The Central Park 5. How does a 3-year-old know this? How does a 3-year-old girl already know this trope? And I would argue that racial literacy has not been developed, probably in the parents, because where would the parents get it? Schools don't talk about it. Where do we get this? We get it from home, and we're not interrupting it at home or in school spaces. And so the ultimate act of incivility is the taking of a life, right? Not valuing that other human being and ripping their life from them. So how do we interrupt, right? That's the question that I'm trying to wrestle with. Where I am now is that I think it has to do with doing this deep excavation of the self. So here we go with the deep excavation, right? Wow, I'm on it, y'all. And I'm going to move a little bit faster. My name is Yolanda Sealy-Ruiz. I'm an associate professor at Teachers College, Columbia University. I was born in the Bronx. My goal in life is to get those who want to be teachers and those who want to teach in so-called urban schools to get it right. My goal is to engage them into thinking about themselves and what their roles and responsibilities are in the classroom. What you believe about teaching has to come from what you believe about the children that you're supposed to teach and serve. And so if you don't do that work for yourself, how are you really going to be open to the stories and the lives of the students that you teach? When I think about my work, and specifically the work that I seek to do with those who are not yet teachers, so pre-service teachers, but I also work with in-service teachers. There's a concept that one of my doctoral students helped me to shape and define in my mind, and that's the archaeology of the self. And simply put, the archaeology of the South, like an archaeological dig, like a digging deep, like a peeling back of layers, is for the teachers to really think deeply about how these issues live in them. Issues of race, issues of class, issues of religious practices, how they look at those who practice religions other than their own, how they look at those who have sexual orientations other than their own. Because for me, I believe that in order to teach someone, in order to be open to someone, and that really is what teaching is, to be open to other people's stories, that you have to know your own story, that you have to be aware of who you are, what you bring to the classroom, how you're going to interact with the children that you are there to serve. And if you're not open with your story, if you do not think deeply about how these issues live in you, you will just exact harm. You will traumatize. You will say racist things unless you really take time to understand, particularly if you're white, how you have been raised to be a racist if you're in this country. And if you're a person of color, how you may have taken in internalized racism, how you might be prejudiced, against those who look like you and others. And so this kind of deep work, I believe, has to be done before we can even begin to have someone take up theoretical practices or to examine your pedagogy. I live in a space of hope because education is just that. And racism is, if I think about a tree, right, it's deeply embedded in the roots of that tree. And so this is the work that we try to fight against, whether it's through racial literacy or culture responsive education. It really is the racism that is deeply threaded through our society, and certainly schools are not unique. If you're interested in seeing more of this, this is actually a 9-part series by Manavaskar Kubal, who makes amazing short videos. It's called CRE Stories. I want you to just take a moment, maybe close your eyes, or you can write, but this is like a private moment. And I want you to begin to answer this question, or to start. Perhaps you already have started. But what do you need to change about yourself or your practices that reflect a deeper respect for people who don't share your racial, religious, class, sexual orientation, etc. backgrounds? So we can just take a moment to go inside our own heads. What do you think you need to change? If we feel comfortable. I know that all spaces aren't always safe, but I always encourage my students to try to create brave spaces. So even when everyone's not feeling safe all the time, perhaps we can be brave in some ways. I think the center of getting to know someone is listening to their story. So I want to take this up and I want you to recall a first memory with racism. First memory. Were you the person perpetrating that act, or were you on the receiving end? Just talk out loud with each other. If it's too painful, just sit with yourself and just let the folks at the table, let them know that you're in a space that you just want to be reflective. But if you feel comfortable taking this up, and I bring this up because oftentimes I'm thinking about our students and what they bring to the classroom. We've all had these experiences, and sometimes they don't have places to talk about them. So if it feels right, just talk out loud with someone. If we can just popcorn style, like we say in English, popcorn style, you throw words out. What was that like? Popcorn style, what was that like?
It was uplifting, it was inspiring.
Inspiring, uplifting. Revealing. What was it like? My friends over here. Revealing. Revealing. Other thoughts?
I think it's painful as well. I think it's
Painful.
painful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Other thoughts in the back? Heartbreaking. You was still talking because it's hard to just drop into something like that and then pull yourself out of it. But how do we continue to have these conversations, right? Is the goal and the hope. So I want to bring in culture a little bit because we have multiple intersectionalities. But I want to bring this in because I have a quick interactive thing I want us to do. So let me just go ahead and play the video. Jeff, am I being dyslexic? Oh, here it is. I got it. Thank you.
Mohammed. 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 Mohammed, the first time I am mistaken for a white man, I feel a rush of joy lurching from my gut. A relief. I finally won a place today. A right to belong and invisibility if only for a moment. I am asked what my name is, and I flinch. The jig is up. I am caught in a lie, Mohammed. The familiarity fades. The little flicker behind the eyes isn't lit for me anymore. The third stage of grief is bargaining. But you look so much like us. You don't look Arab at all. Where do you get your blue eyes from? They are so beautiful. It must be somewhere in your bloodline. We must be this beautiful. Which parts of your ancestry do you owe us? Which parts have you stolen, Mohammed? I've spent my life carving vowels out of my throat so my name will be easier to say. Sanding down my grandfather so I could fit him in a carry-on bag, a driver's license, a job interview, Mohammed, the praised one, the one thanked in the earth and sky. I am pouring oil down my throat until it lines my stomach, until no guttural could ever escape. I still say it the way my first white teacher said it. The way she corrected me in front of the classroom until I learned how to stumble over my identity the way she did. To strip away parts of myself that couldn't be marketed to a Western tongue. I still shave off my curly hair and wear blue to bring out my eyes. So beautiful, where did they? Mohammed. 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 Takes me 19 years to learn how to pronounce my own name in public. The first time I say it, the way my mother did when she named me Mohammed. Feels like I have stolen something back.
So I offer it as a name story to do this in our classroom with our students. What I'd love for you to do, and I know it's an abbreviated time because I'm looking at it's now 1:40. So you can either jot this down or just talk to each other, right? Maybe just one person, because if we do the whole table, we'll run out of time and everyone won't share. But I want you to think about your name for a moment. Your first name, your middle name, a nickname. And I want you to reflect on that name and tell a story. Tell a name story. To just one other person. One other person. What's the story of your name? And if you don't know it, feel free to make it up. That's what we do, right? We're artists. We make things up. We create. You talked about grandmothers, grandfathers, aunts, places you visited, right? So it's so much more, right, than the name. And opening up by starting with the name, we learn so much about our students and they learn about each other. So I just encourage you, for those of you who may be teaching English, there is the Sandra Cisneros house on Mango Street, but there's a short vignette in there called My Name. There's also a short story written by Ralph Ellison around names, so you can bring in different literature and even create like a, I'm always in K through 12, a unit around it and have folks tell their name stories. And you learn so much about the students through just asking them to reflect on their names. I'm conscious of time. Can you believe it's 1:47? I want to take this clock and throw it against the wall because the time is ticking away and I don't want to leave you. So the question is, how can we create classrooms where, in the words of the gentleman of the video earlier, said, where we can all be unique humans together? And this is not assuming that we're not doing that. Yes.
I think one way we can do it is, I teach marketing and merchandising, but I am always talking about literature. We talk about books in every class.
Interdisciplinary, yeah.
Because my students, they're very curious, but they don't have the breadth of the knowledge. So I'll say to them, what are you reading? They'll snicker and tell me. You know, before, it was, a few years ago, it was 50 Shades of Grey. And I said, my grandmother's reading that. You're astonished. But lately, we're talking about the other. And self-identity, intersectionality. So I said, I challenge you to be Hillbilly Elegy. And to be Invisible Man. And then let's talk about it. And the other one I gave them was a tree grows a girl.
Oh, nice.
Because I said, we need to be able to talk about the construct of race and ethnicity so that we can understand it, not in just a little vacuum, but understand the breadth and depth of it.
Right.
Not just in America, but
Globally. Yes, 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 yes.
you know, I said, because, I said, one, you know, as they were being challenged the other day, when we talk about demographics and psychographics, I said, if you could construct your own identity on the census, what box would you want to check?
Wow.
And
Can I just say, that's a dope question. Wow.
what came back was fascinating. It was nothing like what the census reflects. Nothing like that.
And I have a short YouTube video for all of us when you get a chance. It's called Something Other Than Other. And when you get a chance to watch it, you know why that triggered it for me. Something other than other. If it's okay, I think I want to use that in my class. I'll give you props, I promise. I promise. I won't try to steal it and plagiarize it and pass it off as my own. Okay. Right, marketing. I love it. One more quick comment, please. How can we create classrooms where we all can be unique humans together? Other thoughts? One other thought before we move on. I'm looking right at you, and then I'm going to come over to you as well. I'm looking at you. You're at the same table. Yes. What's your name? No, with the striped shirt. Yes. Judith. I'm looking at you, Judith.
Ideology or a mindset of celebration and not toleration. Many times we tolerate, but we don't honestly celebrate. We don't celebrate who the is. But we tolerate it because this is what society has taught us to do, is I'll tolerate it. But the authenticity of the celebration is not there. And it comes out. So I think we really need to know how to celebrate uniqueness instead of tolerance.
Beautiful. I know you had something to say. Yeah, tell us your name, or tell me your name, Naomi.
I also was thinking about authenticity and as an instructor coming into the classroom as an authentic human being.
Yes.
Calling by my first name. And I also do a lot of celebrating, not necessarily publicly, but I will often send emails to my students after they've done something, you know, that they were very brave to do. Personally, and I see the change in them when they walk back.
It's beautiful.
It really empowers them.
It's beautiful, beautiful. I wish we had more time. I'm looking at the clock. Can you believe it's 1:51? Is someone like turning the clock faster? So it brings me all, you know, I'm a one-trick pony, whatever. For me, it is love, fundamentally. It is love that is connected to relationships, civility, how we see ourselves and our students. But it's not the kind of love maybe that some would expect, right? And so love has all of these different definitions. I tend to rely on definitions offered by Bell Hooks and Paulo Freire and Martin Luther King. So Paulo Freire said that it is impossible to teach without the courage to try 1,000 times before giving up. In short, it is impossible to teach without a forged, invented, and well thought out capacity to love. So here's my last video, and we do have enough time for it, and I think maybe there are 1 or 2 more slides, and I just wanted us, before we go off to class, to maybe have a moment of quick reflection. Who put that ad in my video? Go away. Ah, I love it.
What if Martin didn't stand up? What if Rosa didn't sit down? What if Malcolm didn't man up? Where would we be now? What if Marley didn't get up, stand up? What if Du Bois didn't come to advance us? And Mandela didn't come to teach us? Where would we be now? We've been waiting for. We can change the world. We can change the world with our love, 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 love. 'Cause it is up to us. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We can change the world. Our love can change the world. We can change the world with our love, 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 love. Our love can change the world. What if Maya didn't speak out? What if Langston Hughes didn't write it down? What if Josephine Baker didn't dance it out? No. Tell me, where would we be now? What if Sojourner never told the truth? Or Ida B. Wells never printed the news? Harriet never went underground? Where would we be now? We are the ones we've been waiting for. We can change the world. We can change the world with our love, 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 love. 'Cause it's up to us. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We can change the world. Our love can change the world. We can change the world with our love, 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 love. Our love can change the world. Me too, I matter, you matter, we matter. Together we are love. Me too, I matter, you matter, we matter. Together we are love. It's gotta be all of us. Stand up and speak out with all of our love. Love, 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 love. 'Cause it is up to us. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We can change the world. Our love will change the world. We will change the world with our love, 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 love.
There is more. So please, I want to be respectful of going to class, but please watch the rest of the video. I want to say, end with Martin Luther King that says, power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. And I ask that you just carry this with you. I know some of you have to go, and please feel free to leave. But for the last 2 minutes that we have, if you're able to stay, just popcorn style, the hour that we spent together, hour and a half, I was struck by. What were you struck by? Popcorn style, I was struck by.
Your passion.
Thank you. Thank you. I was struck by. Nancy. Nancy. I found myself wondering.
What else can I do?
What else can I do? I found my, ditto. I see a connection to what we've been discussing to what? What connections are you making?
Obesity bias.
Obesity bias. And finally, I would like to continue the discussion by? What a beautiful note to end on. Thank you for your time. I had a great time with you. Have a great class, y'all. Thank you.